Hi everyone. Been doing a little bit of research on a particular mystery to me that caught my attention a year or two back. Finally, have been dedicating a lot more time to it, and with a little bit of help from others as well, I would like to kind of share some of the things that have been discovered recently. When a few members of the family were together, there was a lot of talk about Thomas Edgar Pearson, and I didn't actually expect there to be. But the topic generated quite a bit of interest, and this is still ongoing. But I just wanted to share what's been discovered so far, and kind of go over some of the background information. Um, Thomas Pearson Sr. and Nancy Mills Pearson were actually the parents of Snooks, Joe, Biggin, Sharp. Most people, if not everyone, knows who they were. They were four of the boys that Nancy and Thomas had, and they're the reason many of us are in the family. Now, there was another male that lived to be an adult, and that's actually who this mystery is in reference to, and his name was also Thomas. I don't know if his name was technically Thomas Pearson Jr. or not, but unlike the others, he had blonde hair, and he was the oldest boy of them all that lived to be an adult anyway. And I just wanted to kind of go into some of the details that have been uncovered in this nonstop mystery. And this mystery has been going on for nearly 80 years in the family. But upon researching, it looks like he went by a lot of different names: Thomas, Tom, and Edgar, just to name a few. Most of the family knew him simply as Man or Man Pearson. Um, this is actually the only verified photo that we have of Thomas Pearson, and this is whenever, obviously, he was a very little boy, probably around 1910, 1911, 1912, 1913, something. It's worth telling the story to those that might not know. The story has many versions, but one thing is clear: Thomas picked up and left the family and was never heard from again. The reasons I've heard for this have ranged from insurance money regarding his father who was murdered to land claims, alien abductions. Not really, but there is one person that seems to center around most of the reason why he left, or the argument that he left, and that is Elvin Pearson, his brother, also my grandfather. And the most common story I've heard is that Elvin, or Biggin, same person, had a bit more influence over his mother than Thomas did, despite Thomas being the oldest. And to many in the family, this isn't really a big surprise. Elvin could be very influential, to say the least. Now, as far as Tom goes, I mean, I didn't figure it would be very easy to track him down after he disappeared. The story is his mother was very distraught about it for a long time, and they never heard from him again. But I wondered if perhaps he married, had children that maybe we didn't know about. But unfortunately, it has been rather confusing. According to various sources, he was born somewhere between 1909 and 1912, and as my mom points out, he did a very good job of making it difficult to find him in seemingly every way possible. Now, the kicker to this is that Biggin, or Elvin, reached out to the Social Security Administration looking for Thomas in the 1970s. And again, what Biggin was told by Social Security varies by person you talk to. Now, he was told that his brother Thomas had passed away in that decade, the 1970s. One relative claims he was told that Thomas died in California, and others say it was either Indiana or Louisiana. And I'm assuming with this information, Biggin just assumed that he had passed away and, was forced to kind of just move on. But he did definitely reach out to Social Security. and just I wanted to kind of research this, given that it's been a family mystery for so long. And I honestly, there's a part of me that feels those before us would want us to know more about him, and I think that he deserves not to be forgotten. And his siblings probably would not have wanted him to be forgotten either, and that includes Biggin. I don't think that, especially given that he reached out in the 1970s, he at least thought about him. Unfortunately, I didn't when I was a child. I never heard about him until I was already an adult. But the latest that Thomas can be tracked without much effort is 1940. In 1940, he was listed on the United States Census as the head of the household, living with his mother, Elvin, Joseph, and Virgil, who is obviously Biggin, Joe, and Snooks. And that is how he is listed. And I did notice that he went by Edgar. Obviously that clarified that wasn't necessarily looking for somebody that went by Thomas or Tom or whatever, but they might be called Edgar as well, which obviously raises they could be E Pearson, T E Pearson, E Pearson. I mean, it raises so many possibilities that they might go by. And also, in the murder story about Thomas Pearson Sr., in the newspaper article, it did call him Edgar, or Thomas, the son Edgar as well. And it's likely the younger Thomas went by Edgar to distinguish himself from his father, because I'm sure that got a little bit confusing. As luck would have it, there was another Thomas E. Pearson born around the same year in the same town our family's Thomas was born in, and I believe this has caused a lot of confusion. I was constantly finding information on the wrong Thomas because of all the conflicting information out there. There are numerous family trees and information that's supposed to be legitimate that shows a Thomas Earl Pearson as being Thomas Edgar in our family trees. And I took the bait on this one earlier and thought I had solved the mystery within just a few minutes. And I even called this particular Thomas's oldest son, who was still alive and living it up in Pensacola, Florida. And though I heard an interesting story about a Pearson jewelry line and how it was the best jewelry in the Pensacola, Florida region for many years, I realized it wasn't the same person whenever he said that his father only had one brother who was a dentist, and that was his only sibling. And then obviously I discovered that this was Thomas Earl and not Thomas Edgar. And this was really about the only way that you could tell the two apart. And this photo displayed here is actually the incorrect Thomas Pearson, that he married Alice Malaby and all that. And that's the route that Social Security likely went. Also, because he did pass away in Louisiana, just like one of the family members stated that Biggin was told. So I actually think Social Security dropped the ball whenever Biggin called, and unfortunately it gets a little bit worse from there, because that actually ended up being very unfortunate. With this information, we know whatever took place happened after 1940, and in 1940 World War II had already begun. According to Google, in the draft in World War II on September 16, 1940, the United States instituted the Selective Service Training and Service Act of 1940, which required all men 21 to 45 to register. And it was a month later, to the day, that there was a 5'10.5", 160-pound man with gray eyes and blonde hair that filled out a registration card in Texarkana, Texas, and this is our Thomas Edgar Pearson, man Pearson. This is him. This is page 1 and page 2 of what he filled out. He would later enlist in the Army, and he would take up residence in Phoenix, Arizona. And obviously, we have family from Phoenix, Arizona as well. again, here is another photo, with just his general information, Army serial number, etc. At this point in the search, I kind of thought he might have died in the war. So I searched the National Cemetery Administration for Thomas T.E. Edgar. You get the point. All those came up empty. NARA archive search online came up empty. There is a casualty listing for the war, and there were a couple Thomas Pearsons, but none that really apparently were jumped out at me as being a match. Anyway, and so I got a little bit desperate, wrote the American Battle Monuments Commission, who basically stated kind of the direction that I was already going. They stated that they didn't find anything and that I should probably try to get his military records. And that is what eventually happened. Of course, there were other snags along the way, such as this random obituary that I found on the Ancestry website from the Washington Post. Unfortunately, the Washington Post doesn't really have any way you can talk to anyone over the phone unless you want to subscribe to their paper, or their whatever it is today. And this ended up being no relation, and there was even an obituary that was found that matched everything, but the person passed away in 2005. So good job, Washington Post. So that information was incorrect, basically. Having to go back and reread all the information, all the stop and go, I figured it was best to try to get some concrete information. And with the help of my mom, I reached out to the Social Security Administration again, and the National Archives. And I say again, given Biggin had already done it. I had never done it. Social Security responded by sending us this. This was Thomas Edgar Pearson's original Social Security application. He did not have a death record on file, so it appeared he just disappeared, and that just furthered the mystery even more. But it does verify that he was born on March 19th, 1912, and it's interesting to note that he worked for a company called Sturgis Lumber Company in Texarkana. He also, then his last name is misspelled at the top, and then he also signed it spelled correctly, and he signed it Edgar. So any little way that it could be confusing, it really was. This proved to not be helpful. The National Archives would then respond with their piece, and I'm putting them both side by side here. The first thing that jumped out at me was it was a different Social Security number tied to the person. So I thought, it was getting really strange at this point. And actually what ended up happening, I guess I should just read from my script here. The National Archives then responded with their information, which was more helpful. They had information on Thomas's time in the Army, which was tied to a different Social Security number. Which that obviously opened the door for another Social Security number, and Social Security wanted us to fill out another separate application requesting information on that Social Security number. And even though we had already gone through the rhythms, paid them, and they just carelessly sent us this first one. So there was another one, and upon sending the form for that, we did receive a response which did clear things up quite a bit. Unfortunately, we had to find the Social Security numbers ourselves, but we did get the information we were looking for. Again, the birth date is wrong. He was not born in 1914, as he wrote on there. That would have put him the exact same age as Biggin and Sharp, which obviously wasn't the case. It's interesting to note that he marked unemployed, signed his name as Edgar. This time Pearson is spelled correctly. But basically, this was the Social Security number that he lived with. And this is dated the same day that he enlisted into the military. And so what's likely happened is he filled out the original form, perhaps forgotten that he had filled it out, or maybe knew, who knows, and decided to fill out another one, or they requested him to fill out another one at the time that he enlisted to the Army. And this is the Social Security number that he went by during his lifetime. And as you can see, if you run the Social Security number on a validator, it shows that he went there is a death file on this one, and it shows that he did not pass away actually until April of 1982. And so actually whenever Biggin would have called Social Security, he was still alive, even though Biggin was told otherwise. And he passed away while living in Phoenix, Arizona. And I have found one reference saying that he passed away on April 1st. But this is still ongoing. And this is kind of the end of part one. But that is basically what has been discovered up to this point. There's ongoing things with Social Security, death records, things of that nature, that's still ongoing. Still trying to get a hold of all that. Maybe going to make a part 2 of this if anyone is interested. But this is the bottom line. He died in April of 1982 while living in Arizona. And it's interesting to note in which this is really would be a topic of the second video, but he was only in the military, or the Army, I should say, for 3 months. There was some sort of an accident, and he eventually filed a disability claim. And so he may have lived disabled his entire life, but again, that's kind of a topic elsewhere. But the bottom line is we did figure out when he died, where he died, etc. And so he did live. He did not die in the war. And that is the end of part one. Thank you for listening.